All right, guys, I just want to do a quick orchard tour. I don't know if I've done it since we planted a bunch of new trees. So I'm gonna start right at the front and show you this tree. This is Honeycrisp. It doesn't do so well. The deer come into the yard when the apples start and they start nipping off all the new buds. And it also is pretty susceptible to cedar rust. So most likely we'll swap it out. We'll see if it makes it. Some of these branches come from underneath the graft, so they seem to maybe be a little better to this climate. So, but that's that update. This is a new tree. It's been here about a year, maybe less than a year. It's doing really well. It's a nectarine that Joanna and I planted. I mean, it's at least 6 feet tall. The deer have been nipping the bottom leaves, probably the new leaves, but doing pretty good. I'll include this in the orchard. It's not really a fruit tree, but it's a Concord grape bush, and you can see we've got a lot of grapes. I probably need to cover them up, or the birds and the bugs are going to get them, but there's a lot of grapes this year. If you can see that. Now, this is a tree. It's a couple years old and doesn't do well. I'll probably replace it. It is a persimmon tree. Don't really love persimmons, plus there's wild persimmons around here that we found. So we can always do that. Move on to this pear tree, which is absolutely loaded with fruit. This branch broke. It had so much fruit on it, but it's still growing, so we'll have to trim that off. But it's incredible how much fruit this tree can produce. It is a solid producer every single year, and continues to be that way. Oh, there's a bird's nest right in there. I don't know if there's any birds in it, but just go to the second pear tree. This is another pear tree. I'm not sure what type of pears these are. This tree is also doing really well. Always it's very resistant against any disease. I mean, pears just grow here like crazy. And for those who don't know, this is East Tennessee. So what we like to do is we make apple cider and we add the pears to the apple cider. It just helps balance the apple cider. So this is a wine sap apple, and this tree is doing really well. The apples are a little small this year. They were, I think, a little bigger last year, but it's producing quite a bit of apples. This is a later apple. It'll probably be done towards the end of August, but it's doing really well as well. Kind of walking back and forth. Probably should have planned this out better, but this is a cherry tree replanted. The deer really started to nip all the new leaves off this tree. It's still alive and doing pretty good. It's starting to come back. It's a solid little tree. We just planted that in the spring, so it hasn't had much time. This is a yellow transparent tree. It produced really big last year, and it's about done already this year. You can see there's still some fruit in the tree, but it really finishes off right at the beginning of July. And I kind of wasn't here to harvest it, but the bugs and the deer definitely do the work if you're not here to do it. Right here, this tree is a red June apple, and it is also, the apples are finished. If you shake the tree, apples just fall all the time. And they're sweet and tart. They're a pretty good apple. They're pretty small. This tree is definitely on its last legs. It's a tough tree, but it's past its prime, I think. This is another cherry tree that we planted in the spring. The deer also have been nipping the new buds off as they come up, and been trying to keep the deer out, but I like the deer as well, so it's a tough balance. This is an apple tree. It's from New Zealand, and we planted it in the spring. The deer also have been nipping at it. It is a Monty's surprise, so we'll see how it does. I guess I should go back to these cherry trees really quick and tell the variety. I can't really remember, but we still left the tags on. So this one is a Sam cherry. And this one is a Vandelay cherry. Not sure if those will come up on the video or not, but it doesn't really matter. All right, I'm gonna go to this apple tree. We planted this apple tree in the spring. It's doing really well. It's closer to the house. I think the deer have left it alone more, but you can see the deer have nipped some of these leaves as well. But this is an enterprise apple. Planted this one because it is cedar rust resistant. So we get a lot of cedar rust around here. We have a lot of cedar trees. So we wanted to get trees that were resistant to that disease or the fungus. So that's it. This tree right here is absolutely loaded. It is a Rambo apple. It hasn't really produced since we bought this place, but I trimmed it very heavily. I kind of cut off the top. It was growing very tall, but after I did that, this year it produced the most apples it's ever produced. And I cut down a cedar tree that was in the back of the yard. It still has cedar rust on it, but it would have lost all its leaves by this time last year if we didn't cut down that cedar tree. But you can see it is absolutely loaded with apples. I need to come out here and start harvesting them to make cider. These apples are pretty much ready. Some of them are ready now, some of them need to wait, but it's pretty incredible how many apples this tree has produced. This branch is not broken, it's just weighed down from some of these apples. You can see some of them are really nice sized. That one's probably ready right there. You can see the amount that are already on the ground. And the deer come in here every morning. It's a really beautiful apple when they're ready. Nice stripes on them. I'll move on. This is a Santa Rosa plum tree. We planted this about 2.5 years ago. It still has never produced. It always gets frosted. The flowers come out too early, so I don't know, maybe I need to cover them one year and see. We planted 2 of them. There's one down there. It doesn't do as well. I hit it with the lawnmower, so it kind of got stunted. So this apple tree is also never really produced a lot of apples, and then I trimmed it quite extensively. It probably hadn't been trimmed in 10 years. And I can't remember the name. It's a Blenheim apple. That's what we think it is. The previous owner told us what these trees are, so we're kind of taking her word for it. But again, this tree would have had all its leaves gone by this time this year. There was a huge cedar tree right there, and it still gets cedar rust, but not nearly as bad, but this apple is very crisp and very sweet, but also very tart. It's a very interesting apple. It's probably one of the better eating apples we have. So it's about, some of these are just about ready. Kind of gets like a reddish yellow look to the apple. Oh, I'll go back over to this tree. This tree is another one. It did produce one apple. I wish I would have been here to nip it off, but I did nip it off when I got here. But we planted this in the spring. It's a Liberty apple. The deer also nipped off quite a few of the leaves, but it's still alive, still doing good. Nice solid tree. And we bought these trees from a Burnt Ridge Nursery out of Oregon, and we also have purchased trees from Stark Brothers, and I'm gonna have to say the Burnt Ridge trees much better. This tree right here is another Rambo apple, and it had never produced one apple. It was literally twice this tall. I just clipped it right, I just cut it basically right down. I didn't do a great job cutting it. When it fell, it broke off some other branches, but it really needed to be trimmed. It was up in the power lines, and I didn't want to have to deal with that anymore. And after I trimmed it heavily, it's produced apples now, and I believe also because that cedar tree is now gone. And this is another apple tree we planted in the spring. It is a Wolf River apple, and the deer have been getting this one too, but it's starting to come back, and I need to trim these because these are coming out from underneath the graft. So I guess it's M111 rootstock, so I need to look up and see what that is. But that's it for the apple trees. I'll come quickly over here. We did plant some blueberries and a couple of elderberry plants. So these three are blueberry plants, and that's an elderberry bush. There was another elderberry bush here, and it didn't make it, so that was the only one that we had that didn't make it, which is pretty good. This is a Toro blueberry. This one is a Patriot blueberry. And this one is an O'Neill blueberry. And this elderberry is a Corsair elderberry. So that's basically it for the orchard tour, and I'll give an update maybe in another year or so.